And welcome back to Talk Local, everybody. I'm your host for this evening, Ryan Rocca. Thank you very much for joining us. And as promised, here on set, I have Joe Horneck joining me, who is a political commentator. And we're here to discuss the U.S. general election. Oh boy, what a roller coaster ride it's been since even before the general election began, really, for about a year now. The U.S. election has really been in the news prominently. And Joe, just to start off, what do you make of all this so far?
Oh, you're right. It's absolute crazy town. And I mean, it's insane also that it goes on for an entire year plus, right? We still have another 100 days almost before this mad show is done. And then who knows even after that, right? It may continue. I mean, one of the things that Donald Trump has done today was question that November is going to be rigged. So it really kind of brings up, is he setting himself up for defeat? If he does get defeated, is he going to concede? I mean, that's never happened that somebody would concede if they've obviously lost. And I thought I'd just give you a quick rundown of things he's just done this week. So he picked a fight with a family of veterans who spoke at the Democratic Convention saying they had no right to criticize him. He then doubled down on it, called them some more names, didn't get him in such good water. His vice presidential pick was in a Republican forum today, was booed for not apologizing for said remarks. He then called Hillary Clinton the devil. He asked the mother of a crying baby to leave his rally and then made fun of them as they walked out. He reaffirmed that Russia has in fact annexed the Crimea, which apparently was a question to nobody but him. He then clarified his comments on Russia and the hacking scandal with Hillary Clinton and said, oh, well, I was just kind of kidding. It was sarcasm. Warren Buffett called him out that he hasn't released his tax returns. This just goes on and on. Deutsche Bank today revealed that in 2007, he's only worth $788 million, and not the billions he always says. On and on and on. And, this is just a small list I put together in a couple of minutes. It's just insane. Any one of these issues would kill your normal career, and yet somehow he's alive.
But
it's amazing.
This list of issues compared to what's been happening over the last few months seems like nothing. It seems like if a scandal comes,
tip of the iceberg.
If you wake up one morning, you see a scandal regarding Donald Trump, it'll go away by within a few days for sure. They'll stop talking about it because something else will have popped up. Now, a lot of the time, people say what I've been seeing on the news recently, especially American media, is that they say that Donald Trump is doing this not necessarily because he is unaware of what he is doing, or he is not, or he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's doing it purposely to get media attention. And he, some say, has this mindset that all press is good press. Do you think that applies?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely applies. He really does seem disconnected, except for being able to grab a headline. And as you said, it's like one thing happens, we all talk about that for 30 seconds, and oh my goodness, another thing has happened. And it is just this design to like more attention. And I think I've come up with what I think is really the thing. I think he's a sociopath. And I'm going to read you the definition of a sociopath: superficial charm, manipulative and conning, grandiose self-delusions, lack of remorse, shame or guilt, shallow emotions, incapacity for love, a need for stimulation, callousness and lack of empathy, poor behavioral controls. These are things I just Googled when you come up with sociopath. And I think he's a sociopath. So I think he can't stop himself because I think he's got a condition.
Now, but at the same time, Joe, this has been working. In a sense, it has been working. If you look back a year ago, people would have laughed at you if you said that he would have became the Republican nominee.
Absolutely.
And he got I believe it's over 13 million votes or something during the primaries, which is the most of any Republican candidate ever in the history of the United States in the primary season. Why is that happening?
Well, look, he does speak to a certain demographic of people, I think especially in small towns America, where they've been economically harmed for a real long time. And they do feel the system is broken. And so I think, one of my friends today I had lunch with, he's a Liberal Party person. He's worked with candidates who want to become Liberal nominees in the past. And he says, I kind of think, when I look at him, I kind of want him to win because I want him to break the system so badly, they have to totally reevaluate things. And I think there's something to that with people who are so frustrated in the United States. They say, I'm okay with this guy breaking the system because I don't feel the system's working for me right now. And I think if you are in kind of the one-horse town in West Virginia or Ohio or wherever else where the local industries closed up years ago, you struggle with employment, this guy's going to tear down walls. He's going to give you somebody to blame all the time. And that does have a resonance with a lot of people who are losing hope with the system or losing hope, with the people who he dubs elites.
But at the same time, when you look at Donald Trump constantly says we're going to win New York in November.
Yeah.
During the primaries, he won by huge, huge, huge margins.
He did.
So you address that yes, he does appeal to the local town voter, the small town voters.
Yep.
But then why did he win by such large margins in New York, do you think?
But he's talking to, when you're running in a Republican race, you're talking to Republicans. And he was running against 15 goofballs who were not very high quality candidates, I think. And so because they had no gravitas at all, he was able to suck that energy out, and he kind of made a name for himself, which makes a wave and kind of, works out for him. But in the general election, he's got to appeal to Democrats and independents. Even if he just takes every Republican vote, the way the U.S. system works right now, the demographics, he can't win. Right now, Democrats have an advantage in the Electoral College because the demographics have been swinging their ways with large urban centers and minority groups, especially Latinos and the black community, heavily voting Democrat. And if he can't break into that, he has no hope, just like Mitt Romney had no hope. I mean, we all pretended that Mitt Romney had some hope, but that was just a show for ratings, I think. At no point did Mitt Romney ever lead in the polls for any substantial amount of time, barring a few polls, which would be the number 1 out of 20 that you always read. 19 times out of 20 will be right. Well, 1 out of 20 times he was winning, and that was about it.
Now, Donald Trump, as we all know, I'm sure everybody has heard, especially if you've watched this race at all or watched any of this news coverage at all, Donald Trump constantly bashes the media.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he does make one good point. At least it's this point here. The media does not necessarily focus nearly on Hillary Clinton's flaws as much as they do Donald Trump's. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think they do to some extent, but he's overshadowing them because, like we say, we talk about one thing and then it's immediately eclipsed by the next thing. And so although Hillary does have problems, and to be honest, like I have to say, like myself personally, in 2008, I preferred Hillary over Obama for a period of time. He eventually kind of won me over, but I thought she was a safer choice back then. So I kind of have a natural wanting to like Hillary. But I gotta say, I got no enthusiasm for her now. I mean, she's just been caught in the server scandal stuff, which was just stupid and sloppy, but has been compounded time and again by mistakes that she's making. Yesterday, she made a mistake. She exaggerated the FBI's supposed exoneration for her, which was not true. It's an unintended gaffe. It didn't have to happen. If Donald wasn't out there calling her the devil and doing all these other crazy things he does, we'd be forgetting about it. But I mean, he does this kind of thing on a daily basis. So it's easy to forget it. And, at the one hand too, if you're an intellectual person, at least you can say, if I don't like Hillary Clinton, I'm not worried about with her finger on the button. With Donald Trump, I'm worried about his finger on the button. That is actually a scary thing. The military is not allowed to say no if he wants to attack something. They just do it. There's no checks and balances there on that. So, am I worried about Hillary Clinton that way? No, not at all. Was I worried about Mitt Romney or any other nominee that's come up in that? No, I've never been worried about a nominee, regardless of party, until now. And this is where you seriously have to wonder about this stuff. Is he actually mentally stable? And as Obama said today, he doesn't have the temperament. He's not fit to be president.
But at the same time, just going back to the topic of media coverage, just because Donald Trump does these Atlantics every day and does cause scandals, obviously those issues should receive some sort of media coverage. But do you think that those issues should still overshadow such serious issues that Hillary Clinton has done to cause it to be nearly pushed away out of the media spotlights, just like the email scandals, the issue with Benghazi, the Benghazi hearings, the most recent DNC issue with the emails being hacked into by WikiLeaks. Do you think that should really be overshadowed?
Well, I think she did suffer a lot of that during her primaries. I mean, honestly, had she been a stronger candidate, she would have put Bernie Sanders to bed a lot sooner. I mean, everybody kind of looked at Bernie Sanders much like we looked at Donald Trump. No way he's going to do well. He can't be taken very seriously. She's going to steamroll him. She's got all the infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. He stuck around for a long time. And, if she'd been a stronger candidate, if she'd been Hillary of 2008, where she didn't have these scandals that had piled up on her, she would have put him to bed in February. But, as you say, like she did have these things. So I wouldn't say that it's been ignored, but it's just being overshadowed by the sheer madness that Trump has come up with. And, his instability. When other Republicans even refused to come to the convention, look at the only previous president or nominee that came was Bob Dole. The Bushes skipped. Romney skipped. Governor skipped. They don't want to be seen with him. They just think he's reckless. So, I don't take it seriously. I think what's coming up, though, is Chuck Todd on NBC today said, you know what, with this issue on the veteran and the mother and the father of the veteran, this is the last exit ramp for Republicans. If you're going to get off this crazy train of Trump, now is your last chance. Because at this point, you've apologized and you've apologized and you've apologized. And how can you say I apologize all these times, but yet I still endorse? And
we're going to continue that right after this quick story and break from one of our reporters here, Joe. So let's take a look at this Ink Movement story submitted by one of our on-location Rogers TV reporters.
With 3 chapters across Canada, Ink Movement is a youth-led nonprofit organization dedicated to providing a platform for young artists to shine. Tonight, Ink Movement Mississauga launches Volume 4 of their youth anthology. Kathy Hugh, leader of this year's project team, tells us more about tonight's event.
We're having the official launch for our Mississauga Youth Anthology Volume 4. So at the very beginning you saw speeches from both Prashir and I, as well as community supporters that helped us, such as Yuki, who works with the United Way and provided us with the Youth in Action grant. In addition, you heard words from Cheryl, who was our contact at In Our Words Publishing, and Sadaf, who is our liaison here at the AGM, who provided us with the space here today. In addition, we had presenters and performers who presented pieces that they had featured in the anthology.
Prashir Pasricha, president of this year's Mississauga chapter, tells us about the theme of this year's project.
For the youth anthology, and with the theme this year, What's Wrong, our goal was to identify the local and global issues that youth in Mississauga are passionate about, not only talking about, but also tackling. And so we wanted to hold this event to sort of officially launch this collection of all of these pieces, and to get the artists together, maybe to discuss some of these issues with the community and how they feel we can tackle these issues.
My piece was titled Happy Boy because I wrote it a couple years ago when I was going through a lot of stuff, and I was experiencing depression and drugs and all these things, and I was in a place where I just felt like I was at the breaking point. I needed to write about how I felt and how maybe it could help someone else some way. It was about speaking up and not letting everything else hold you down.
My piece of work is entitled First World Problems in B-flat minor, and it's basically about what happens when you have a high school student who's stressed out to death, who has exams and portfolios to make for a university, who's applying to university, and basically these are the compilations of my thoughts. So I've taken everything that I needed to do and everything that I was thinking about at that time, and I made lists just as a way to cope with all the things that are going on with the grade 12 senior. And basically, at the end of everything, I took those lists and I made something with it. So I decided to make it into a paper mache violin. The violin's a full-sized piece, and it's basically combining my love of music and coping mechanisms to deal with kind of the anxiety going on with my life.
For more information on Ink Movement and their endeavors, visit inkmovement.org. In Mississauga, Hannah Nichols, Rogers TV.
welcome back to Talk Local, everybody. And still joining me here on set is Joe Horneck, who's a political commentator, and we're discussing the U.S. general election. And you could go on with this discussion for a very long time. But next, I would like to move on to the topic of polls. And really, maybe it was because of the conventions, most likely, that's been having a large impact on poll numbers over the last few weeks. But they've really been, just like this whole election campaign, a roller coaster ride. So let's take a look at some of the numbers. Last week's the CNN ORC poll had Trump at 48%, Clinton at 45%. The LA Times had Trump at 47%, Clinton at 40%. And then when we look to this week, just after the Democratic convention, the same CNN ORC poll has Trump at 43%. And Clinton at 52%, and the LA Times has Trump at 45%, still in the lead with Clinton at 43%.
Yep.
So it's a lot of back and forth with these polls. But at this point in time, Joe, does it matter? Do polls really matter at this time?
This is the point where they start to matter. Before this, traditionally, pollsters will tell you until the conventions have wrapped up, people really don't start solidifying in their minds who they're going to pick, at least the people who are in any contention of moving their vote. Mm-hmm. There's some people who will always vote for the red dog or the blue dog, and it doesn't matter who that dog is. And in this case, independents and people who may actually move at their vote, this is the point where they start mattering. And you know, the polls today, you've mentioned the national polls. I think what I'd look to, if you want to follow these things, is you got to look at the state level polls. And I saw 2 state level polls today that had Hillary Clinton winning by 1 point in Utah and by 2 points in Arizona, both incredibly red states. I can't even name the last time a Democrat won in Utah. It was the most Republican state with Mitt Romney last time. I think he won by a 62% margin. And Arizona, the last time was, I believe, Bill Clinton's first election in '92. So to have those states even in contention, let alone that she had a poll that put her in the lead, I think is a swinging for her. I've long thought, I think, you know, people said it during the nomination, and I did too, you know, Trump's going to phase out. He's not going to win. I agree. I was wrong then. I think this time, though, I inherently believe that there's no people who are of great intellect who will support Trump. I think even the Republicans will start fleeing him very soon. And there was one Republican congressman from New York this afternoon who said, I'm going to vote Hillary. So he's the first sitting Republican at a national level to say, I'm not going to vote for Trump.
At the same time, when we look at both of these candidates, a common term is that they're both incredibly flawed. And when we look at the poll numbers in regards to that question do you think this candidate is flawed, those numbers for both of the candidates is extremely high. If they're so high, and many people are exposed to these numbers, how did they become the nominees?
I mean, you're right. Well, books will be written about it. I mean, with her, I think you can say just mass name recognition, huge party infrastructure, fundraising, and you know, just she has a lot of very significant backers who've been with her, who believe in her and the family for decades now. You know, and that's her thing. You know, she is the Democrat. In every sense of the word, right? She also has a huge resume to support it, right? Secretary of State, Senator, First Lady. You know, she's got quite a resume. I mean, pure bravado, and I think the weakness of having 16 opponents. I mean, when you get 16 opponents, it's a lot of noise. The only surprise is Jeb Bush fell apart, and everybody kind of, Jeb Bush.
Very early, too.
Very early. And he showed that you can't buy elections necessarily if you don't have a good product. And, you know, he demonstrated in debate after debate, he was just a phenomenally weak candidate. You know, he was just very weak performance, very blasé, very poor, monotone way of delivering things. It just, it did not work for him whatsoever. So that's how they won. I mean, my question is, on polls, I think of Donald Trump a little bit like Rob Ford. And in the absolute worst hour of Rob Ford, there was still 15 to 25% of people who said, I'm still with him. I don't care if he's a drug user. I don't care if he said this thing about different peoples. I'm still with Rob Ford. And I said to my friends at the time, I wonder, would Rob Ford actually have to shoot somebody in broad daylight for that percentage of people to kind of say, that's enough? And it's funny because Donald Trump is actually mused about that. He said, I could walk into the middle of a New York street, shoot someone dead, and they will still vote for me. And I find that amazing. What would somebody have to do before he basically said, I'm done with this party, I'm done with... in the States, you only have two choices. In Canada, luckily, we have 3, 4. Mm-hmm. I just can't believe that some people are going to back him. In the end, they will, because it's only two choices.
But at the same time, even here in Canada, I would obviously pay attention to the U.S. election, but I've never been so intrigued by a U.S. election like this year before. It really is amazing. And that same amount of intrigue, I think, is obviously way more prevalent in the United States.
Yeah.
And one thing that you really notice is that the supporters of these candidates are extremely, extremely passionate. But I think that passion is more so present on Trump's side of things, the hardcore Trump supporters, as opposed to Clinton supporters, who a large portion of them are moving towards Clinton just because they don't want Trump. Would you agree that passion is more present on the Trump side of things? So
the polls seem to indicate that Democrats are going to vote Democrat and Republicans are going to vote Republicans, and it's just kind of a 10% wiggle room between which side that group is going to go to. Passion, I mean, the Sanders people were very passionate, very noisy, but also very undisciplined. I think just, kind of saying, I think people mistake their undisciplinedness for being like over the top passionate, and maybe in some regards it is. But you can be disciplined and passionate too. I don't think that she's got an enthusiasm gap in that sense. I think, a lot of people are going to be driven to voting against Trump. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are going to be driven to voting against her too. There is that segment of people who just kind of say, I don't like the Clintons, and I never will vote for the Clintons, ever, ever, ever. I just don't trust them, and, so I think, there's both sides that will happen.
And then that obviously is going to have an impact on the more independent candidates. So do you think that we're going to see potentially even record numbers for independent votes?
Third-party candidates? Outside of Ross Perot, there hasn't really been a useful, or Ralph Nader, 4%. The third-party movement's never really gotten going in the States, which is kind of unfortunate, I always thought. The rules in the States are so cooked into having only two parties. It's difficult to even get on the ballot. Yeah. So these third-party people, there's a Libertarian candidate, there's a Green Party candidate that I'm aware of who I think are going to be on majorities of ballots. They still won't be on every state's ballot. So even if you like them, you may not even have a choice of even voting for them because the rules and regulations are so cooked. Mm-hmm. And also, those candidates they can't compete. Name recognition, television time, endorsements. They're at no level are they going to be competitive in this. So you know what? You'll get the 5%. Oh my goodness, I can't do either. I'm going to do this. Honestly, when people in the States especially are not going to vote for a candidate, they just won't show up. Mm-hmm. I think that'll be the interesting thing is how many people show up on election day. With the last two elections, we've been driving out more and more people. This could be the election where it goes the other way. And fewer people say, I'm staying home, I can't stomach either of them. Yeah.
Now, a very common theme during this election, and we've been seeing it a lot on the news, obviously when they're discussing this election, but more so in regards to Trump and Bernie Sanders, and that is the sense of anti-establishment. Yeah. That really played a huge role over the last few months here in the election campaign. Now, do you think that anti-establishment sentiment is going to be having an effect on Hillary Clinton at all during the general election? As we saw just this last week, the DNC emails it show that the Democratic Party favored her from the beginning. She's the establishment candidate. Bernie Sanders was considered to be the outsider who wanted to push away the Wall Street banks. Yet even with those emails being released, we saw that after the Democratic convention, according to CNN, she still had a 7-point jump. Yep. So will that still play a big role like it has for the last few months?
So, I mean, I think definitely Bernie Sanders moved her further to the left than she would have naturally gone. I think, when I look at the Clintons, I look at people who run to the center because they know that's the place to get elected at. Mm. And I think that's where your natural inclination would have gone. So, will that last beyond the general election? I think she will make anti-Wall Street noises because you know what? Donald Trump is making anti-Wall Street noises. I mean, that's the other thing is you got to think of both of them actually line up on two things. The anti-trade Pacific Trade Agreement, they both don't want it to happen, and they both want to go after Wall Street. That's amazing. That's unprecedented for a Republican. It's funny how Trump and Bernie have both pushed her into these positions that I don't think she would have otherwise gone to. And if and when she's president, would she keep that? Well, she could also say, hey, Congress twisted my arm here, and so I don't know how long it'll last, but I think she'll keep it up for at least the general election because Trump's out there saying the same thing. So I mean, Trump also unfortunately goes off on NAFTA and NATO, which she won't have anything to do with because those are wacky positions. I think saying you're going to either renegotiate NAFTA or I'm bailing on NATO, the most successful alliance in history. That's just wacky.
So do you see any validity to Trump's claims that
the anti-establishment stuff?
Yeah.
You know what? Again, I think it speaks to that certain constituents who got really harmed in the crisis, and don't underestimate that. I mean, there are so many people that even if you look at the unemployment rate having gotten better, there are so many people out there who are making less money than they did before. And you know what? In the States, it's always been a bit of a winner-take-all system. There's far less social safety net than there ever is here. So you know what? If you're on the downside of this year after year, yeah, you don't like the establishment. I can understand that. What's it ever done for you? I mean, in Canada, we're lucky we have a bit more of a safety net, so I don't think we have that kind of push and mentality, which makes it hard for us to understand, I think. But in the States, you look at a banker making bazillions of dollars and getting bailed out, but yet they shut my car plant down and I get nothing? I mean, that doesn't seem fair.
Now, we just have just under 2 minutes left here. And regardless of who wins in November, it's going to have a big impact on Canada.
Yeah.
What impact do you think that will have in regards to if Trump wins or if Clinton wins?
If Clinton wins, I don't think it has much of an impact. I think President Obama has been up here in Canada the last few months, and it's a very warm relationship with the current Liberal government. I mean, I don't see a big departure with Clinton. I mean, there'll be some minor policy differences, but not much. Honestly, if Trump gets in, all of the leaders of the world are going to have to really look at themselves and go, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Because he essentially just wants to rewrite everything. And, that's really tough to deal with. I don't know what people's ability to handle that will even be. If it gets closer to the end of the election, I think we'll see a lot of people in Canada, the UK, Germany, starting to have rallies against Trump and stuff because, honestly, it will be scary if he gets in. Tearing up NAFTA, I mean, what's it going to do to the car plants here in Ontario? Let alone what's it going to do to those companies? They're going to lose it. If you tell Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, Nissan, all these other companies that are shipping auto parts across the border every day, that's come into jeopardy, whoa, that's bad stuff. Business confidence will hit the floor. It's bad stuff if he gets in. It's not to be underestimated.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on Rogers TV. That's Joe Horneck, who's a political commentator. Regardless of who wins, we know that the next few months are going to be a roller coaster ride, just like it has been over the last year. And that concludes our show here on Rogers TV. Thank you very much for joining us here on Talk Local, and be sure to tune in again next week.